too late. Maybe I'm too old now, or just afraid that you'll walk away.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to put together an $800 gaming PC build step by step. I'm going to run through all the parts I selected and why, the build process from start to finish before booting this machine up to see exactly how it performs in some of the most popular titles. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. As always, I'm going to kick things off by installing our CPU and our RAM into the motherboard. And this is the ASUS Tough Gaming B550M Plus. It's got a whole host of really great features, including built-in Wi-Fi, so you haven't got to buy any adapters or anything like that, and sits as a great budget option on the future-proofed B550 chipset. That means it supports our CPU choice today, AMD's Ryzen 3 3300X, straight out of the box. Lift the arm on your socket up and align the triangle on the socket with the small golden triangle on our CPU. You can then drop the processor nicely into place and return the arm back down. With 4 cores and 8 threads and a boost clock speed up to 4.3 GHz, this is a really great budget CPU choice. The next step is to install your RAM or your memory. Normally I go for a snazzy RGB kit, but Corsair's Vengeance LPX is such a good deal at the moment that I couldn't justify anything else. Pull back the slots on the 2nd and 4th RAM DIMM slots and align the notch on the golden strip of your memory with the corresponding notch on the socket. We're then going to slide the RAM nicely into place and clip it down on each side. We're going to do exactly the same for the 2nd DIMM, and we're all good. Next up, I'm going to grab a screwdriver and remove the stock plastic mounting hardware on our motherboard. And that will let us install this stock cooler that comes included with our CPU nice and easily into place. And this will normally come with pre-applied thermal paste if the CPU is brand new, so no need to worry about installing your own. And we're just going to plug up the 4-pin PWM fan header to the CPU fan header on the motherboard and tuck this cable away so it looks nice and tidy. Next up today then, I'm going to move the motherboard into the case. And I'm really excited about this one. With a legit tempered glass side panel, loads of mesh at the front and 2 huge ARGB fans, I think you'll struggle to find a better budget case. As always, one of the first port of calls is to remove both of the side panels. You then want to grab this bag of case accessories and screws, as well as the I/O shield from the motherboard box. We're then going to clip that nice and easily into the back of the chassis, with your audio ports located at the bottom. Finally, you need to ensure there's a gold standoff installed in our case in each of the locations that lines up with the holes through our motherboard. In our case, we need to pop one in here, here, and here. And you can just do this with your thumbs. And then once that's done, I'm gonna lay the case flat to make this next bit a little bit easier. And go ahead and slide the motherboard in through the rear I/O shield and on top of those standoffs, securing it down with the included screws from a moment ago. That's looking pretty good to me. Next up, I'm going to install our power supply and do some of our cables and wiring. This unit is 80+ bronze certified, so you know it's going to be pretty efficient, and also has these quite nice blacked out cables. Spinning our case around, this is going to install nice and easily with the fan facing downwards, and can be secured into place with these screws that come included with the case. The next step then is to plug up some of these cables while everything's still nice and easy to access. The first is the largest of any cable today, our 24-pin motherboard power cable, and this goes to the right-hand side of the motherboard, just like so. Next up is our dual 4+4 pin or 8-pin CPU power connector, and that goes to the top left-hand side of the motherboard, once again, just like so. Finally then today, we've got our front panel cables, and these basically make the ports and buttons on the case, well, work at all. First up is USB 3. This is keyed, so will only go in one way and can be a little bit delicate, so be careful. Next up is HD audio, which goes to the bottom left of the motherboard, and this has a pin blocked out, so is essentially keyed just in a slightly different way. Finally, we've got our front panel connectors. These make the kind of LEDs and power button on the top of the case, and these go to the JFP1 port on our motherboard. If you get these the wrong way around, or you know the positives in the negatives, don't worry. Nothing's going to explode, your system just won't turn on. I've popped a diagram on your screen now to try and make this as easy as possible to follow along with. With those wires and cables out the way, the final component to install before our graphics card is this, our storage. I've opted for a 500GB Kingston A400. It's a really affordable SSD. It's not the quickest in the world, but is a lot faster than any hard drives today. To install the SSD, we're going to spin the case around once again and remove this SSD mount just here. We're going to use the same screws that we installed our motherboard with to line up the SSD and secure it down into place. We then need to give the drive data and power, first up by installing a SATA power connector, just like so, and then grabbing a SATA data cable from your motherboard's box, and one end goes into the bottom of the drive and the other through the motherboard and into one of these ports on the bottom right corner. With all those components now installed, all that's left to do is pop in our graphics card, and this is an RX 5600 XT, specifically a very snazzy ASUS STRIX card. They do loads of different variants at different price points, and I'll link them in the description below. We need to go ahead and actually take out the second and third PCIe slot covers, and in this case they kind of just wiggle out before pushing back the clip on our top PCIe slot and just sliding the graphics card nicely into place. Secure it down with a couple of these screws, and I am honestly super happy with how that looks. All that's left to do is grab a PCIe power connector and plug this one up in the same way that we did for our motherboard and CPU power connector. But I think that is pretty much it. All that's left to do is to whack both the side panels on and then boot this machine up to see how it looks, but more importantly, just how it performs. Roll the montage. Okay then, now you've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up, and of course the build process of putting it together, let's dive in and see exactly how it performs. I've tested 7 of the most popular, most complicated and most mainstream titles out there to give a really even performance picture. The first title today is Apex Legends. At 1080p high settings, you're looking an average of 143 frames per second, and visually the game looks great at high settings. A bit of 1440p gaming is also really possible here while maintaining that 60 FPS mark, as is over 200 FPS at lower settings 1080p. Talking of really high frame rates, Fortnite is next up. 1080p high settings, you're looking an average of around about 150 frames per second, and once again the game visually looks really nice. No lag, no stuttering, no screen tearing, nothing like that. And if you wanted to jump up again to 1440p, you'd lose a bit of frame rate, and equally you could gain some by dropping the settings down at 1080p. Overwatch is the next title today at 1080p ultra settings, so we're really kind of maxing things out, but of course VSync disabled across the board to get over 60 FPS. You're looking at around about 145 frames per second. Once again, the game looks great. Overwatch is such a fun title. I think it's probably my favourite at the moment. It's just got that kind of arcade feel about it, and the frame rate certainly to match. Forza Horizon 4 is the next title today, a little bit biased, but this probably is like my favourite game of all time. The game looks fantastic at 1080p ultra settings at 130 frames per second, which is just a stupidly high number for a racing game. If you were playing this game on the big screen and wanted a bit of 1440p gaming in exchange for a bit less frame rate, that's also possible here. And racing titles on consoles at least tend to run more in the 40-45 FPS region, so 130 is an absolutely insane figure. Counter-Strike Global Offensive is next up. We love a bit of CSGO here on the GeekaWhat channel. Probably the easiest game of all of them to run today, but at 1440p, so notching that resolution up, ultra settings, you're looking around about 190 frames per second on average, and it never really dropped below 150 frames per second, so you can be pretty much guaranteed a consistently high frame rate experience here. That 190 FPS mark is surely fast enough at 1440p to please even the most frame rate hungry gamers out there, but all in all, very happy. Game looks as good as it possibly can for a bit of CSGO. The penultimate game on the list today before we wrap things up with GTA 5 is Call of Duty's Warzone. probably the most popular title at the moment of all of those on my list today. And at 1080p, medium to high settings, so depending on kind of the exact settings on your screen, we went for a bit of a balance of both. Of course, there's no ray tracing support with an AMD graphics card, and actually the free Battle Royale Warzone mode doesn't actually support it anyway. It lets you change the settings, it's really quite confusing, but at these settings we're looking at 111 frames per second. The final game today then is GTA 5. I ran the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, as I did with Forza Horizon 4, so if you want to go back and compare this system against lots of others, you're more than able to do so. At 1080p high settings with the render bars set to about halfway, ambient occlusion toned down a bit, and of course VSync disabled, you're looking in the region of 116 FPS. GTA 5's frame rate can be really temperamental, and there are certain settings that will really hammer that FPS. Likewise, depending on the scene you're in, so in a plane your frame rate's going to be higher, say, than on the ground in like a gun or an explosion scene or that kind of thing. Overall though, I was really impressed with this system. The 5600 XT is a really powerful card, especially for a budget build like this, and you really can't go too far wrong. With that being said though, that not only wraps it up for the gaming benchmarks today, but the whole video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to drop a big old like rating and do get subscribed if you aren't already, so you never miss another GeekaWhat video. Thank you very much for watching though, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.